Hello and welcome to the Magnum PI Rewatch podcast. My name is Graham. I'm from LoadingReadyRun.com, where we do funny internet stuff.
I'm Kathleen. I'm also from that place.
Yes, and this is something that we have actually wanted to do for a while. It started as a joke, didn't it?
Well, my love of Magnum PI is no joke. Let's
right.
back that truck up here a little bit.
I'm sorry for ever suggesting such a thing. When you search for rewatch podcasts on iTunes, you look at the sort of shows that are done with them, and it's literally every Star Trek. That whole sort of class of 80s, 90s sci-fi cult shows like Babylon 5 and Farscape, and there's ones for Twin Peaks, and our friend Max does one for Lost.
Yeah, and there's all these good shows that have rewatch podcasts, but why not a pretty good show?
Hey, now you say, pretty good, but at its time, Magnum was like A+ #1. It ran for 8 seasons.
That was unprecedented in the 1980s. Normally television shows ended after 7. There wasn't any of this 11-season bullshit.
Yeah.
I guess the Cosby Show went for 1 trillion years as well, but that was also kind of unprecedented.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow.
So for those of you who are unfamiliar with what a rewatch podcast is every episode of the podcast, we will be talking about an episode of the show, which is we'll go watch the show and then tell you about what happens so that you don't have to watch it yourself.
Or you can watch it yourself.
Or you can watch it with us, I guess.
With a brand new appreciation.
Yeah, it's up to you how you do it. But in this pilot episode of our rewatch podcast, we will be telling you about the pilot episode of Magnum PI. But why Magnum? What's your connection?
Okay, so Magnum PI, because as we mentioned, started in 1980, so it makes the show older than both of us.
Yep.
When I was a kid in New Zealand, TV was not perhaps as fresh as it is in North America when you have the yearly crop of new shows. New Zealand TV in sort of the mid to late 80s had 2 channels. I remember actually right before we left New Zealand in 1989, they were getting a 3rd channel, and that was really exciting news.
Whoa.
There was a whole, for some reason, every week my mother bought the TV guide, even though there was 2 channels.
Wow, okay.
It was a thing that she did.
It's like in England, what's on the other side? They still call it that. BBC One and BBC Two. They call it the other side.
Well, one was there was New Zealand TV One, which showed boring things like the news. This would probably be the channel I'd watch now. And TV Two showed exciting things like reruns of the Charlie Brown and Snoopy show, which I found out later were not 1980s productions, but mid-70s productions. So they're already 10 plus years old by the time I got to see them. A bit of a backstory is that when I was a child, I was homeschooled, but my mother did not care much for children. And so I had a lot of what I would call unsupervised television time, what I watched probably inappropriate things for my age group, because as long as I just stayed away from her and did not make noise, I would not get in trouble.
Yeah, Magnum I don't think is... It's.
Would you let a 5-year-old watch that show?
No, the pilot we just watched, probably not.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
No.
I turned out fine though, so maybe it's okay. But anyhow, so this show forms a warm, fuzzy spot in my heart as one of the first things I can remember watching. I have no idea when I came in. I just remember that Magnum was on TV, and I remember my dad had a mustache like Magnum. And I don't know if my dad grew the mustache because of Magnum. It was the 1980s.
So everyone had mustaches.
Oh, yeah. If you look at the cast of Magnum, only one main character doesn't have a mustache.
Yeah.
This was
Mustache Power Hour.
Yeah, it was the most concentrated era of mustaches in history.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so Magnum had a mustache. My dad had a mustache. Magnum seemed like a cool guy. He had a red car. That's about as far as my appreciation went. But I'd always had this kind of nostalgic spot in my heart. And when I was in university, actually... I was very, very poor. I've been poor most of my life, but I was especially poor in university. And I could not afford cable, but we did have cable internet because priorities, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out that if you plug in your TV into the cable anyhow while you have cable internet, you'll get a 1 or 2 channel bleed over. I swear to God, this trick works. If you cannot afford cable, but you have cable internet.
They might have fixed that now.
Yeah, this is a while ago.
Yeah.
But it still worked in Prince George when I was in school.
And you got Magnum?
I got 2 channels.
Uh-huh.
I got A&E and CNN.
Oh, wow.
So CNN was useful for, news.
Back when it was better news.
It still wasn't great. Let's
Okay.
be honest here. I think those people that harken back to the days of a wonderful CNN perhaps did not watch that much CNN.
Fair enough.
But it also got A&E. And, of course, this is back in the day where there wasn't as many reality TV shows as possible. So we're filling the gaps in the schedule with old episodes of network television, including, to my extreme delight, Magnum PI. I watched so much Magnum PI when I was in university because it was one of the only things on. It was on all the time.
And you were like, I remember watching this when I was really young.
Yeah.
Now, for my part, I think I've watched the second half of like 4 episodes.
Yeah.
Ever. Like just from channel surfing when I used to live with my parents, be like, oh, this looks like fun. Explosions, car chases, generally kicking ass. It seemed fun, and I'm aware of it.
I feel that most people are aware of Magnum and have never seen an episode.
Yeah, like it looks campy and pulpy and silly, but I've never actually seen it until now, and so I'm really excited about this.
Okay, but why should you watch Magnum if you've never seen an episode of Magnum? Well, Graham, do you like shows like NCIS or JAG or Quantum Leap?
I like Quantum Leap.
Well, then you would be interested to know that Magnum was produced by one Donald P. Bellisario, who is the person responsible for all of those other shows.
That's a name.
He has made a little television production empire of these very kind of similar shows with sort of similar themes and characters. Basically, all his shows usually feature somebody who's in some kind of like American military or Navy kind of command. I guess the best example of that would also be NCIS, which is like the Navy Investigation Services, which actually, and that agency actually shows up in the pilot of Magnum. And Magnum is an ex-Navy Marine.
Yeah.
He always has like these like wacky casts of friends who like maybe don't get along all the time, but sometimes do get along and have like a grudging friendship. And he's got like these kind of like playboy, rough exterior, but heart of gold, actual nice guy characters. Like there's a character like that in NCIS. There's like a character like that in JAG. There's obviously Magnum. Like all of this goes across all of his shows. So anyhow, and
which is interesting because Magnum, this is we're going to be doling out the Magnum trivia over the course of this podcast, but originally the pitch for the show was very much more James Bondy. Like it was like he was going to be the ex naval Marine doing working as a PI, but he was going to be like way more James Bond, like suave and debonair and totally cool and everything. And Tom Selleck wanted to play him more as like a affable, kind of lovable jock type character. And they disagreed on it. And so Tom Selleck said, all right, well, I've been offered the part of this role, Indiana Jones, in a movie called Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I think I'm going to go do that instead. And the writers and producers of Magnum PI were like, okay.
You do it your way.
Okay, we'll do it your way. And so what we ended up with was, I think, a much better series in Magnum PI and Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, which is probably better.
I feel like
it would have been a very different series of movies. It would have been more like the Alan Quartermain movies if Tom Selleck had been Indiana Jones.
Well, no, I think it would have been the same movie. I think Tom Selleck probably has enough range as an actor to play basically the same kind of character as...
Probably, but how was he able to demand... Prior to this, he'd done like a guest spot on 2 episodes of the Rockford Files and like a bunch of other like single... Like he was not a huge star before
He
Magnum.
Started out as a model.
Yes.
Very, very pretty man, Tom Selleck.
We see a lot of him in the show.
But I feel like that worked out better overall. But can you imagine a Magnum PI where Harrison Ford, they just did a switch?
Oh, wow. That'd be so weird.
I feel like that would be the more 007 show.
Yeah. Also, originally, Magnum PI was going to be set in Southern California.
Why'd they go with Hawaii?
Because CBS was that year wrapping up production of Hawaii 5-0, which had gone for 12 years, and they didn't want to close their Hawaii production studio. So they were like, well, we got this new show we're doing. Let's set it in Hawaii.
And if it's a hit, good.
Yeah.
And it was.
And that brings us neatly to the pilot episode, the 2-part pilot.
We'll cover both parts in one podcast. We won't draw you out in unnecessary suspense.
Because we watched the first episode and we were like, we should figure out how this ends. So the pilot episode, Don't Eat the Snow in Hawaii.
I mean, that's a clever joke once you know what the episode's about.
Yeah.
Spoilers, cocaine. Very edgy.
Yeah. So the cold open, the camera fades up on a beachfront in Hawaii. And very similar to that scene, as you mentioned, of Daniel Craig in Casino Royale. There's Tom Selleck wearing tiny shorts.
Except he is much hairier than Daniel Craig.
Oh, yes.
This was the 80s, and chest hair was de rigueur.
Yeah.
There are jokes in Bloom County, which is a very famous comic strip from the 80s about Steve Dallas applying mascara to his chest hair to make it look fluffier, just as a reference point for you.
Yeah. And so he swims ashore with a bag of like clothing, and he starts narrating. I actually did not know that he narrated the show.
Yeah, he does like this little like sort of like breaking the fourth wall narration where he kind of tells the audience what's going on.
Yeah, he's like, so here I am breaking into this building.
And you may be wondering.
Here's the stuff in the building. Yeah, but I also live here. And you're like, what? And he's like, so you may be wondering, why am I breaking into the place I live? And so it sort of sets up a bunch of different things.
I get the idea that it's not necessarily supposed to be fourth wall breaking, that it's more just, this is actually Magnum's running head commentary he has going on, because he's very much the star of his own show.
He does, about 10 minutes into the show, he does literally turn to the camera.
Yeah. I didn't know if that was an accident or not.
So as he's sneaking into this place, and we'll tell you more about whose house it is and everything in a moment, as he's sneaking into the place, he has a flashback to Nam, because he was in the Vietnam War. This is 1980. This is only 5 years after the Vietnam War ended. This was actually considered kind of controversial at the time. But the show is also praised for showing positive examples of Vietnam veterans. Because most of the main cast, their characters were in the same unit in Vietnam. And they're being treated nicely.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's like a Donald P. Bellis, not the Nom thing, but like the serviceman thing is like a Belisario trope. But also, you have to remember, in the historical context of the Vietnam War, it was a draft war. People didn't want to go. People didn't really see what they were doing there. So there was this whole like, it's not necessarily shame, but it was not the kind of respect that you get for veterans coming back from like World War I, World War II, Korea, the other wars today, like Iraq, Afghanistan. Like, people like respect that these are shitty situations to be in, and that, these people made a choice to go for the common good, but that's not how Vietnam kind of shook out.
Also, they didn't win. The fall of Saigon was them hauling ass out of there.
I mean, there's that.
It's a little uncomfortable.
Anyhow.
So he has a flashback to Nam.
And I'm like, boy, there's a lot more Nam flashbacks than I remember.
Yeah, and it's just sort of him remembering just sort of shooting and being shot at, and it's not really clear exactly what's going on. And so then he goes back to explaining what the situation is with this house. This house is owned by an author who is a friend of his, Robin Masters. And he's allowing Magnum, the private investigator, to stay there in exchange for testing the security of his sort of Hawaiian compound. And the security of the Hawaiian compound, apart from the gate, the lock he is picking as he's describing this, is the major domo, as he describes him, Higgins, who's this British pencil-mustached
World War II captain or something.
Yeah,
basically.
He's all clad.
Or maybe Korean War captain.
He's all in the thing. It is supposed to be World War II. He looks younger than his character probably should. He's all clad in khaki shorts and he's sort of running the compound in tip top shape and all that.
He looks like he could have fallen out of the World War II series of Blackadder.
Yeah, he really does. So it's Higgins and his two dogs, Zeus and Apollo,
who are really well-trained dogs.
Incredibly well-trained. What kind of dog are they?
Those are Doberman Pinschers.
Right. And
that's one of my skills, is I can identify dogs.
And basically the quest is he's trying to steal Robin Masters' Ferrari.
Yes.
That's what he's doing in this sort of pre-title sequence. Mm-hmm. And so there's also two, I believe they're Russian or German.
They're probably not Russian. They're probably
German.
West German.
I think they're German. Stewardi. They're flight attendants, but in the show they call them stews.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah.
I think that might be the first and only time anyone's ever referred to them as stews.
A couple of East German stews.
There'd be West German, Graham. It's the 1980s.
Sorry, West German. Anyway, let me just tell you, their hair was so feathered.
They were like twins too.
Yeah, so they were like hanging out in Robin Masters' house.
Yeah,
and just sort of flouncing around in bikinis.
Mm-hmm. I have to like, for historical context, this is the 1980s, so I keep saying they're not Russian, they're not East German.
I know.
But also, airline stewardesses today do not perhaps have a a glamorous job output. We basically kind of refer to them as like bus waitresses of the sky, as I think is a good way that people kind of. And I realize that stewardesses actually, are really highly trained and know like high levels of first aid.
It's also not just women now, which it was at the time.
Yeah, but I'm getting to that. Flight attendants. I'm getting to that. But back in the deep dark 35 years ago of 1980, flight attendants were basically still like hot chicks on planes because air travel was still very expensive. It was like more of a luxury thing, and there was this more like luxury feel to it where like beautiful women in like nice uniforms would be attending to you essentially. So stewardesses back in those days were usually picked more for their looks than their skills. So I think the system today is better, even though the position probably has less respect.
So they're in the house as well. Which is only marginally relevant later. But anyway, so the sequence is he's sneaking around. He distracts the dogs, jumps over the fence, leads them through, manages to lock the dogs outside the guard fence because he like distracts them with meat or something. Higgins is running downstairs. Magnum is sneaking around the garden. Plentiful shots of Tom Selleck's butt clad in wet trunks as he's sort of like crouch running through the thing.
Had I been a gay man or a woman who was at all interested in people instead of merely a twinkle in my parents' eyes in 1980, I would have very much enjoyed watching the sequence.
Yeah. And then he finally gets to the Ferrari, but of course Higgins has installed an alarm system in the car that Magnum has a minute to decode, or the alarm will go off, and that'll be the lose condition for stealing the Ferrari, I guess. Well, he also can't start the car until he does it. And he determines that it's going to be Robin Masters' phone number. And he said in the narration, how did I know that would work? And he says, I didn't. But if it wasn't the right combination, then I would have lost. And fate just wouldn't do that to me.
That's kind of a through line for Magnum, and he's just kind of like lucks into stuff like that. He's just like, this is how it's going to go down, I guess. I think if you've never seen Magnum, the character, and you are a nerd like me and Graham, I think the character that you would actually most be able to closely equate Magnum to is No Word of Lie, Spike Spiegel.
From Cowboy Bebop.
From Cowboy Bebop. Like, both... I would describe both of them as like very happy-go-lucky, externally affable people with like sort of a dark past secret that haunts them. And they have success with ladies and they like to flirt with them. They almost never kind of like get together with them. Like Magnum usually like kisses girls and stuff like that, but he's usually not quite a Lothario.
So yeah, I've got
we'll come
more
back
on
to that.
We'll come back to that later in the episode.
But yeah, so just switch out like knowing awesome Jeet Kune Do for just being sort of a general private investigator, and switch bounty hunting for
being a private investigator.
Yeah. Private investigation, and they're basically the same character. So if you like Cowboy Bebop, maybe you'll like Magnum.
So while Higgins looks horrified to the degree that if he was wearing a monocle it would have fired out of his eyes, and Magnum smirks directly into the camera as he says fate wouldn't do that to me, he then peels out, and bam, we're in the opening titles of a montage of Magnum driving around Hawaii. Boy, did they ever shoot this on location, with not good theme music. This is not the quintessential Magnum PI theme music. It may have only been used for the pilot. We haven't actually got to the second episode yet, so I don't know when they made the change.
I think they made the change for the actual show, because that is terrible.
And the whole pilot is presented, like all the footage is through this silhouette of a stylized cross symbol that it was made very obvious in the pre-title that Magnum has on a giant ring. It looks like a Hall of Fame ring, but as we find out, it's actually from
his squad in Nam.
His squad in Nam.
But yeah.
So then the opening titles are terrible. And then we randomly cut to people checking into U.S. Customs at the military base. And this guy is coming through with some sort of travel documents. And the guy at the airport is like, what documents are they? I can't read Japanese. And the guy flashes his NIA card, the Naval Intelligence Agency, and says, you don't need to worry about what these documents are. And the guy's like, okay. So Magnum is getting his Ferrari to go pick this guy up because this is his friend. This is his friend's name is Cook. He was in the squad with him, and he's coming back from visiting Japan for 24 hours for something, and he wants Magnum to pick him up at the naval base. So That's why Magnum's got the Ferrari. So the guy goes out front of the naval base and meets. This is a very James Bond thing too. This is very similar to a couple different Bond films when he arrives at the airport and gets picked up by the wrong people. A guy dressed as a naval officer, or
as a military police officer, actually.
Comes up and is like, "Hey, the captain wants to talk to you, so we'll drive you over there." And there's this really cool shot. Something I noticed, Magnum's actually got a lot of really interesting cinematography.
I mean, they might be better because it's the pilot, so we'll have to reserve judgment. But this is a beautiful shot for a television show because it's a one shot with complicated actor choreography and two drivers having to choreograph.
Yeah, so the camera is on the hood of the car with the two fake military police officers in it. And then Cook is sitting in the middle of the back seat. And then out the back windshield, you can see Magnum's bright red Ferrari 308 GTS pull into the parking lot. And Cook says, "Oh, that's the guy who's going to pick me up. Could you pull over?" And the guy just keeps driving. He said, "Hey, could you pull over?" And the guy's like, "Sorry, we're not doing that." And then the guy in the passenger seat grabs Cook, like starts bending his arm around as the car that they're in is turning to keep Magnum's car visible through the rear window as it's parking. And then drives away. It's just really, really nicely set up. So that
took multiple takes.
Yeah, so they're obviously not who they claim to be. And there's a sort of some cuts back and forth with Magnum walking in, finding out his friend's not there, walking back out, with Cook being beaten up and punched very hard in the stomach by these gentlemen. And then this weird shot of Cook crawling towards a chain link fence near the road and seeing Magnum drive by, like maybe 20 feet away, and going, "Magnum," and then dying.
Yeah.
And you're like, how did he die from just being punched a couple times? He looked pretty okay.
Maybe he had a weak spleen.
I
think, can you live without your spleen?
I
always hear about people rupturing their spleens, and I mean, spleen seems like a, inherently funny organ. I'm not sure. We'll come back to that in a future episode. If somebody else gets punched very hard, we'll carry up that spleen thread.
So cut to naval autopsy, and Cook died because some of the 10 sachets of cocaine he was smuggling in his stomach were burst.
And you're like, wait, what?
Yes. And Private Healy is there with Captain Cooley from the military base. Private Healy is suggesting that because Cook's dad is an admiral, that maybe we should omit
what's happening.
A couple details. Say he died of a cocaine overdose, but omit the fact that it looks like he was clearly smuggling cocaine back from Japan.
Yeah, we'll omit some of the most egregious cocaine-related facts from the release.
Captain Cooley says no.
Fuck that guy.
We're going to strip him of all of his military honors, and he is getting a dishonorable burial. And you're like, whoa. Boy, Captain Cooley really hates this guy. That's weird. Cut back to Magnum arriving home, where we find that the only thing in his fridge is beer.
That is a reoccurring gag throughout the show. He has a mini fridge that's only stocked with beer.
Yeah, and Inga and Helga, I believe.
Well, maybe they're Swedish. They're probably supposed to be Swedish.
Oh, of course they are.
Swedish twins, Graham.
Of course they are. Anyway, they're like, they welcome him back, and he's like, "Oh, you guys down?" Because it's moonlight. They're like, "You guys hanging out at the tidal pool?" And they're like, "Yeah, it'll be great to get back out of the suits and back in the pool. You can come join us if you want." And he's like, "I don't have my trunks." And they're like, "That's okay." And he's like, "Ooh."
Yeah.
But first he has to make a phone call. So there's this ridiculous slapstick bit where he's on the phone to trying to get a hold of his friend Cook.
And this is before the age of portable phones, so he has like a rotary dial telephone with on
the longest extension cord.
People had them on really long extension cords back in the day.
We did too. So he's running back and forth between the beer and the phone and getting his binoculars so he can look at the stewardesses swimming around topless.
Yeah, I would like to point out that the stewardesses actually came into that scene wearing matching crochet, like an identical crocheted bikini, but just in different colors.
Mm-hmm. And
so
they're
cute.
They're like, "Hey, you should." So this is what I was talking about when he's not James Bond, because they're like, "Hey, you should come down to the pool or whatever." And he's going to go down, and then when he calls, he gets Private Healy, who tells him that Cook is dead.
Mm-hmm.
So he does not close that deal, which Bond would have. Bond would have closed the deal with the twins, then gotten the call.
He would have worked through the pain.
And then you get this shot with this really harsh lighting. It's completely black. You don't see the room Magnum is standing in. You just see him, the head, like you see his head and the receiver, and the hand holding the receiver of the phone is the hand with his nom ring. And there's like this bright light glinting off the ring, and it's like this really like harsh lighting, and then it goes to another flashback where you see more of him and Cook literally in the trenches in the jungle of Vietnam, and then it fades to black. And we come back up on one of the many helicopter shots of Magnum driving the Ferrari around Hawaii.
Oh, just the budget on this.
I mean, they clearly used the hell out of the location, which is great, because the whole thing was actually shot in Hawaii. Even the stuff on the soundstage was on the Hawaii Five-0 soundstage. So he's going to the airport to pick up Cook's kid sister and his dad, who's the admiral, right? So this is his buddy Cook. They were in Nam together. They were in the Navy together. Magnum left the Navy for his own reasons, and now he's going to pick up Cook's sister and dad so they can come and do
the body pickup business.
Yeah.
However, the dad is not there.
The dad is not there because he refuses to believe it, basically. Not refuses to believe it. He's shocked, and he's just like, no, especially because in Captain Cooley's report,
they're like, this kid died because he was smuggling a bunch of cocaine, it burst in his stomach, and what a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm. And Magnum is incensed that he's just gonna let it sit there. He's like, why isn't your dad's an admiral? Why isn't he doing this? Why isn't he doing this? Why isn't he demanding this information? We all know that Cook wouldn't have done something like this. And
his kid sister, who is basically like, oh, my dad just, can't believe it. Also, he's hoping that you won't believe it either. So now Magnum has this.
Well, no, the line is he is going, because Magnum asks, and what? He's just going to accept them at their word? And she says he's going to accept it. He's hoping that you won't.
Yeah, so now Magnum is basically obligated to investigate this. What he thinks is a murder, but what everybody else thinks is death by misadventure.
That conversation scene, by the way, is just randomly on an incredibly rocky beach.
Yeah.
Incredibly windy, rocky beach because, like I said, they have the locations, so...
And I'm like watching...
Why not a coffee shop or a cafe or car?
I feel like people would do that now because getting the sound on that must have been a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of big wide shots of them on this beach. So is this 80 yard later? Like, I don't know what lapel mic technology was like back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not as good as and small as inconspicuous as it is now.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they got that. Maybe they 80 yard some of that later.
So then hard cut to... do you ever see Once Upon a Time in Mexico?
No.
The Robert Rodriguez movie?
No.
Okay, well, for those of you who have, the scene where Johnny Depp goes and kills the cook, it's a shot like that. There's this hard cut to this over-the-shoulder shot of Magnum, like in a video game, like a third-person video game, like Resident Evil 4, like over his shoulder, as he like just walks into and through the offices of the Naval Intelligence Agency, and then cuts to the inside of the Captain Cooley's office as he like just slams the door open.
Oh man, I've always wanted to enter an office that way. Hi, I'm here to pick up my IKEA furniture. Wham.
And he confronts Captain Cooley because he's like, how,
You know this wouldn't happen. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, what assignment did you send him to Japan on? And Cooley's like, I never sent him to Japan on an assignment. I would never do that. And Magnum says, well, Cook told me that he was in Japan on an assignment for the Naval Intelligence Agency, and Captain Cooley says he absolutely was not. And they get into a heated argument, and the captain reveals that
I would describe it as he is not a fan of Magnum nor Cook, because Cook's dad is an admiral, and he feels that Magnum and Cook, being close friends who met in the Naval Academy, kind of got fast-tracked through there due to family connections, and he had to work for 30 years to get his commission.
Mm-hmm. And while he says while he didn't strip Cook of his honors and rank and all that out of revenge or anything, that it is he considers that because that is the appropriate course of action by the letter of the law, he considers that just desserts, basically.
This guy's a jerk.
Yeah. So Magnum's like, all right, I got to find out some more information about this. Well, first, Cooley kicks him out of the base, and he says, if you ever come back here, I'll charge you from everything from treason to indecent exposure. And Magnum says, look, I'm going to look into this, and it's going to come back to you, and, you're going to look really bad.
I think what he exactly says is early in the conversation, Cooley is talking about how long it took him to earn his stripes. And then Magnum says, I'll strip you of the stripes that you spent 30 years sucking eggs for.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a great line. Really expressive.
There's some entertaining lines. So then Magnum's like, all right. I got to find some other way into this. So there's Private Healy, who we saw earlier. He's the guy who... He's
technically an ensign.
Ensign Healy. Pardon me, Ensign Healy. I'm sorry to our naval viewers, listeners, whom I was misranking Ensign Healy. He was the guy who was like, maybe we don't have to tell the Admiral that his son was smuggling coke. And so he's leaving the base in a real nice car, in like a Corvette, like real nice. And... which actually we commented on when we were watching it. It turns out that doesn't go anywhere. We were like, that seems like an awful nice car for an ensign on a naval base. Turns out it's just a nice car. He doesn't have any sort of ulterior whatever. Anyway,
he just liked cars.
So Magnum's like, here, let me take you for a beer. I got to ask you some stuff. And he's like, look, I want you to steal me Cook's case files. And Healy's like, are you insane? I could get in trouble just for talking to you because my captain hates you so much. And he's like, all right, look, can you at least... Because Healy and Cook served together. Healy joined the unit just as Magnum was leaving the Navy. So they kind of know each other, but...
Not really.
Not really. And Healy tells him that Captain Cooley basically... that there's no way that he corroborates that Cooley would never have sent Cook to Japan because... Cooley hated Cook and had him do all the most menial naval investigation stuff possible. Like, someone stole something from this guy's footlocker, so Cook, you're in charge of tracking that one down, right? Like, the most petty, busy work ever just because...
Because Cooley is a jerk.
Because Cooley's a jerk. And actually, I wrote it down in my notes here, something that you noticed in this scene, because there's a tracking shot of Healy and Magnum walking together down the docks, and Healy's, of course, in his full uniform, and Magnum's in his trademark jeans and Hawaiian shirt, but wearing the identical belt. He's wearing his military belt.
Yeah. I thought that was a neat detail.
I got a nice belt. So Healy basically agrees that if he hears something, he'll try to tell Magnum.
Which is useless, but, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And Magnum resolves that he will just steal the case files then, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. Pull back. The camera pulls back, and there's a man in a phone booth watching Magnum.
And oh my goodness, it's the same man who beat up Cook.
It's the same two men, yeah, because there's another guy standing outside. The second guy eating, like, soft serve ice cream.
And they have, like, this little slapstick bit where, like, the second, like, Thug 2 has ice cream on his face, so Thug 1 kind of, like, wipes it off and does, like, oh, got your shirt kind of thing.
Like, with his thumb?
Yeah.
I thought it was a cute little moment.
It was a very...
They have fun with their work as hitmen.
I mean, like, they seem like good friends. It makes the upcoming scene a little bit more tragic.
Yeah. So then we're midway through the episode, and... or through part 1, and Kathleen points out that it's now time for the Magnum PI midway summing up.
Yes.
So there's this shot of...
I like how I knew this would happen.
Yeah, so they're following... The two hitmen are following Magnum as he's driving along the freeway. So we're just getting these wide helicopter shots of Magnum on the freeway while he's narrating everything that you've just heard. Mm-hmm. Like the episode thus far. He's sort of putting it all together in his head. So then these guys start actively chasing him. Mm-hmm. He goes into a tunnel. He turns his lights on. They forget to turn their lights on because their car is crappy. And then he realizes they sort of pump the brakes. He realizes they're chasing him, and then it becomes an actual chase scene. By the way, the car, because he mentions that their car is crappy, so he can outrun them, but that they're actually shooting at him. There is a couple shots in here where their crappy car takes a hard corner, and there's gas just pouring out of their gas tank,
which actually proves to be relevant later.
Yeah, but I don't think this was on
purpose.
It was not featured enough to make me think that it's on purpose. I think that there was actually just gasoline sloshing out of the tank.
Oh dear.
So the lackluster chase scene.
I mean, Magnum actually says, "Wow, they don't have enough car to catch me." Yeah. So he's not really too concerned about it. But then he says, "This blew my mind." He goes from not being worried to suddenly being worried because what if they hurt the Ferrari? Where is he going to get $60,000 to replace it? Man, you can't. Like, that is the price of a nice, what, Volvo nowadays?
$60,000 Ferrari, yeah.
Jeez. All right, so anyhow.
Once again, this is the 308 GTS. So then they do the classic thing where there's like cars coming the opposite direction on the highway, and there's a car trying to pass an RV, so both lanes are full in the oncoming direction. And Magnum swerves around both and is able to do it, and the other car can't quite swerve, and they go off a cliff. And it tumbles down, and the car does not explode.
No, but it does catch fire.
But it does catch fire. And then the gas then ignites, and then there is a small gasoline explosion. And then Magnum's like, okay, so they're dead. This'll look weird.
I'm just going to go home.
I'm just going to leave. I can't help them, so later.
There's a disturbing lack of consequences to many of these Magnum cases.
But before the scene cuts, we see that one of them, Thug One, the big Hawaiian guy, is not dead.
Uh-oh. Womp, womp, womp.
Womp, womp, womp. Cut back to the Robin Masters estate, and Higgins and Magnum draw a thick white line down the estate. Higgins is like, all right, if you're so determined to be leeching off my employer, Higgins says, I get the main house, the stables, and the tennis courts. Those are off limit to you. You get the guest house and the car, and we will consider the pool a demilitarized zone.
But relevantly, before this happens, Higgins lets on that Magnum has told Robin Masters that Higgins' security is top-notch, and it is completely impenetrable, even though Magnum was able to steal the Ferrari at the beginning of the scene. So it's set up that Higgins owes Magnum a favor, because had Magnum reported honestly, as Higgins probably would have done, Higgins may not have his cushy job anymore.
Because Magnum said, I figure your security is impenetrable to anyone but me, because he's a suave jerk.
Yes.
Also, he offers, I just liked this, he offers Higgins a whiskey. And so they're both having whiskey, and he puts ice in his glass, and he's about to put it in Higgins' glass. And Higgins says, don't ruin my whiskey with ice. I'm not a bloody American.
In real life, Jonathan Hillerman is, of course, from Texas.
Yeah, John Hillerman, who plays Higgins, is actually from Texas.
This might be the only case of an American affecting a British accent in the history of television or movies.
And,
I'm joking.
I know. And he cheers to Prince of Wales Regiment, West Yorkshire, because he's from the war. So then Magnum makes a phone call to another one of the sub-characters, the supporting cast.
It's Rick.
It's Rick. Rick on the phone at Rick's Cantina, the terrible disco we'll talk more about in a later. Or we'll talk about a little later. Rick says, all right, you can talk. It's your nickel.
And I'm like, it took me a second to process it, because I'm like, what does payphones...
5 cents.
I guess payphones cost 5. Wow. And I'm like, geez. And then what is also sprinkled throughout this conversation is that in the pilot, at least, not so much in the actual show, Rick is obsessed with Casablanca. And he keeps dropping all of these Casablanca references.
Really ham-fistedly.
And I'm like, I feel like this is actually worse in the 1980s, because Casablanca is like old, but not like so old that it's like come back around to being retro. Is just something old people like.
He wishes he was Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah. Like he's clearly got this thing going on. And then I feel like it's more ironic now, but irony in that sense had not been invented in the 1980s, so it was just stupid.
What I like is that he makes that at the end of the phone call, he makes that like of all the gin joints reference, and we're like, oh, and then it cuts back to Magnum, who's like, oh.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Even Magnum's like,
it's supposed to be ham-fisted, which I like.
Cut that from later episodes, because I thought the audience could not identify it with it. Yeah.
Well, actually, there's a change to Rick's employment, but we'll get to that.
We'll
in
get
later
to that
episodes.
later.
On his way out, before Magnum calls Rick, Higgins makes reference to Magnum's sister. Just sort of makes reference, and Magnum's like, what?
Well, you might have saw me do this. I was like, Magnum, and I know. I'm like, Magnum doesn't have a sister.
Yeah, and Magnum just sort of doesn't say anything, but sort of looks confused. So he gets off the phone with Rick, goes into his bedroom, and there's a bag there, and there's someone in the shower. And it turns out that it is actually Cook's sister, who did not go back with Cook's body because she said, no, if you're solving this case, I'm here, I'm helping you. Mm-hmm. And
to her credit, she is actually quite smart and helpful along the entirety of this case.
Yes, and then
she is not just merely a damsel in distress to slow Magnum down.
This is the second James Bond setup that Magnum does not close the deal on of the episode, where she's in a towel because she's just gotten out of the shower, and he's like, well, the only question now is, who has to sleep on the couch?
And then there's this moment, and I'm like,
There's
ew!
this moment, and it looks like something's going to happen, and then he's like, wait, what's this envelope? And she's like, oh, it's full of Cook's effects. And he's like, oh no, the nom again.
Yeah, and then we go to a third Nom flashback where we get more setup where we meet a pilot, and we see that Rick is in fact on the helicopter where they're trying to get an evac from.
Yeah, so there's
But his name is actually Orville.
Yeah, so there's a pilot who we don't yet know the name of in a helicopter with Rick, who now runs the cantina, and on the ground is Magnum and Cook and their commanding officer and a couple other guys who are trying to get to the helicopter. And that's where it ends. That's where part 1 ends. I believe these were originally aired
Back to back.
Back to back. Part 2 opens. There's no opening titles because it's just part 2, because it was basically like a 2-hour TV pilot.
A 2-hour television experience, Graham.
Yeah. So we like the first part on the DVD ends so abruptly that we were like, we have to, for the first episode of this, we obviously have to do the whole pilot or else
This is terrible.
this is terrible. So, oh yeah, something I forgot. When Magnum is going, the beginning of the first episode, when Magnum's going to the naval base to pick Cook up, he knows the guy at the guard tower, and the guard like makes some side reference to the Ferrari clearly not being Magnum's car, and Magnum's like, "What do you mean it's not my car?" And the guard just laughs. He just laughs at the mere thought that this could be Magnum's car.
I mean, it cost $60,000, Graham.
So then they go to Rick's like nightclub, and the valet
who knows Magnum
also does not believe it's Magnum's car, and also demonstrates this disbelief just by laughing. No dialogue. And just like, wow, nice car. Who'd you steal it from? What do you mean? It could be mine. And the guy just laughs at the mere thought that Magnum could have any money.
Yeah. So Rick's Cantina. This is not the bar he ends up with in the TV show. If you're a fan of the TV show, you know he actually runs bar at the King Kamehameha Club. Mm-hmm. It's a beachfront bar. We'll get to that later. But in the pilot, he runs this sleazy, gross Moroccan-themed disco with like one-way mirrors out of the office and like
reflective mosaic tiles on the columns. It is the chintziest.
It is like and Magnum refers to it as the Snow Palace.
Yeah, because that's where you go to score Coke.
Yeah, and I'm like, whoa, this is considerably more down market than the actual TV show, and a lot grosser and seedier. Like.
And how does Magnum convince Rick to help him?
He tells Rick that if he doesn't help him figure out where all this cocaine came from, basically Magnum is like, I want to talk to somebody who has enough cocaine that they wouldn't think of blowing 10 ounces of cocaine just to kill someone, which is quite a bit of money. Mm-hmm. The leverage he uses is he threatens to reveal Rick's real name, Orville.
Yeah. He says, he talks to the DJ at the club and says, "Hey DJ," or like, "Hey Sam, yeah, is your real name Sam?" "Hell no, it's Albert." Like, cool. Well, Rick's real name is, and Rick's like, because of course he called the DJ Sam because he thinks Casablanca is so sweet.
I think it's great that if you could choose any name, it's the 1980s, so he chose Rick. Which is like, who chooses that name today? Nobody goes into a place and they're like, oh, I can finally reinvent myself and lose this baggage. I want to be a Rick.
So we go into Rick's office, which is decorated in dusty rose color.
It was the 80s.
And
big fan of Queen Vic.
Yeah.
Rick.
Rick tells Magnum that Snow White is there, and he's arranging a meeting. Snow White is a cocaine queen, I guess.
Mm-hmm. She is the lady who runs the cocaine business in the island.
Yeah.
Or on the island. And
they look at her through the one-way glass in Rick's office, and they're like, oh, she looks so young, because she's 19 from...
And she's Vietnamese.
Yep. And the actress doesn't look 19.
No.
But apparently she's supposed to be 19. And she was married at age 11.
To some sort of cocaine drug-dealing warlord who, through the Vietnam War, had control of all the drugs coming in and out of the Golden Triangle.
Yeah, and then he mysteriously died somehow, and no one really knows why, but they're pretty sure she did it.
I would do it, too, if I was her. And anyhow, she has a French accent.
Which is interesting.
Well, no, she has a French accent because the French were the colonial rulers of Vietnam.
Yeah, no, that's why it's interesting.
Okay.
I'm not like, here's a French accent. How'd they mess that up? I thought it was interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's why Vietnam has banh mi, which is like delicious sandwiches on like really good French bread, because they stole they took the thing that the French people were good for, which was bread recipes, and then got rid of them because they were not so good at treating the Vietnamese people very nicely, so they kicked them out.
We got the bread, thanks. Take off.
Yeah, pretty much piss off. We've got the one thing you're good at. But it means like upper class Vietnamese people spoke French and were educated in French, and so therefore ended up with French accents. So that's an interesting little touch, which you really don't see nowadays.
So Snow White has a friend who is a gold smuggler, and what sort of nationality is he?
He also seemed French to me.
Really? He looks sort of like from Turkey or something.
Swarthy,
yeah.
He was indeterminately swarthy.
His shirt was unbuttoned down to like halfway between nipples and navel, and it was just like hair. Like
but that's what Magnum would look like.
I know, that's what I'm saying. He and Magnum were having a chest hair off in that scene, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, so what they determine is that she obviously is not the one who killed this guy, but she wants to find out who did, because if they have that much cocaine, then that's a problem for her.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that it's probably this guy, Naboul, who also has a bunch of...
Laboul.
Laboul? I thought it was with an N.
No,
I swear it was Naboul.
I thought it was Laboul.
I kept chuckling about Star Wars every time they
No.
said Naboul.
I'm pretty sure it was Laboul.
Okay.
So, blank Boule.
Anyway, Boulio.
El Bulio.
El Bulio.
El Bullion.
Okay.
Bullion. Bouillabaisse.
Apparently has a bunch of gold that he's selling for half market price. And this guy's, the gold smuggler is super annoyed about that, because this is cutting into his business.
Yeah, and then they're like, well, who is it? And he's like, if I knew, I would be buying this gold, right?
So they have to figure out who Naboul is, because they figure that he's the crux of all of their problems. So then you cut to a helicopter you'll see much more throughout the series. It's black and orange and yellow.
It's kind of the iconic Magnum helicopter.
Yeah, being driven by a new character that just gets introduced.
Well, you've seen him in the flashbacks.
Yes, you saw him in the flashback at the end of the first part, because he was Magnum's helicopter pilot in Vietnam. And now here he is running a helicopter tour business, I think, in Hawaii. And TC stands for something, I can't remember what. But anyway, they call him TC. He's wearing a Da Nang baseball cap, and then it goes back to another flashback where they're in Vietnam. They pop smoke. They're running for the helicopter that Rick and TC are in. The two other unnamed dudes in their unit don't make it. Their captain, or whoever the commanding officer is at the time, I don't know his actual rank. I don't think it's brought up.
He gets shot, but isn't dead.
Lays down covering fire for them. Magnum and Cook are the only ones that make it to the helicopter. So you got Magnum and Cook and TC and Rick, and they're all in the helicopter, and they escape. And then there's this really cool scene transition to the Vietnam helicopter flying out of shot, and then the cutting back to present day, and the tour helicopter flying back into shot. I was really pleased with that. So they're looking for boats. There's only so many yachts around here, which is crazy that he's like, there's 19 yachts here. There's 6 yachts down at this beach. There's 3 yachts over in this bay. We got to go look at all the yachts. I'm like, how are there so few yachts?
I feel like money was more concentrated in the middle class back in the 1980s, and there was like less yacht owners and more people who like yachts but don't get to have them.
Right. So TC's like, well, what about that boat over there by this island? The island, by the way, I do not pretend to know how to pronounce. And Magnum's like, no, that's a naval whatever craft they're just doing on patrols. I don't think we're going to find El Bulio on a naval craft.
So I just looked it up. It is La Boule. L-A space B-U-L-L-E. La Boule.
La Boule, all right.
And so, my source, magnummania.com.
So then they go looking. There's this montage of them, Magnum with binoculars, TC, they're flying around in this helicopter with weird music.
Oh, bad music.
Again, the pilot did not have good music.
No, and this is like it's weird, and it's kind of like smooth jazz, and like 80s educational theme music, like is
Yeah.
how I would describe it. Like,
And then when Magnum has the epiphany that he's like, wait a minute, the Navy doesn't patrol on Sunday. That's not a naval ship. We need to go back to that island because that must be it. The music underscoring this revelation is real.
kind of like.
Do you think we can use some of the music in the?
I'm just gonna put some of the music in.
Let's listen. Right? That's weird.
That's not exactly high stakes danger to me.
Yeah. So they get back to the boat. The boat doesn't have markings.
Ooh,
It's a private craft, but it looks, the silhouette, the lines are that of a naval craft, but it is not.
Oh, so sneaky.
Yes. So then they buzz the thing once, and then the people on the boat realize that they're being watched, and then they go back again so Magnum can take a bunch of pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And
With one of the longest telephoto lenses I
Yeah.
have seen in a long time. Think about how much that cost him.
a lot.
Oh yeah, that's
Well, he's a private investigator. That's a business expense right there.
yeah, but like those things are not cheap.
No, they're not. You could probably buy a Ferrari with that money.
Well, I don't know about that, but
Well, two of them. So then he's taking pictures. They're being shot at, and there's a guy, Laboul. We assume to be Laboul on the deck of the boat, but you can't tell who he is because he's got binoculars in front of his face. But he is a white guy.
Mm-hmm. And Magnum is like
everyone else is Vietnamese.
Magnum's like I kind of recognize
Like his stature.
stance. Yeah.
I immediately guessed who it was, but that's beside the point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, and also there's the fantastic line of Magnum telling TC, there's no way the guy involved in this is in the Navy.
Yeah.
So it's like, And I'm like, all right, Cooley's definitely in on it now. If I didn't already completely suspect him because of his sudden, like, willingness to, like, write this guy off and throw the book at him, even though he's, like, the son of an admiral and it seems like a really bad idea for your career to piss off an admiral.
Yeah.
Right? And now that they've said it's not going to be in the Navy, it's definitely connected to the Navy.
Yeah. So obviously Captain Cooley is being set up right there. So it goes back. They're developing the photographs. Higgins, as you said, a fan of /K, is immediately like, oh yeah, they're using these guns with this modification with blah, 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 blah. And it uses these rounds. And Magnum's like, yeah, okay, they were shooting at me.
Yeah.
So then they chat for a bit in Robin Masters' like hella kitchen. Man, wood and white tile and copper everywhere. That kitchen is on point.
Is pimp.
Yeah. And Magnum wants Higgins to run the picture over
To Rick.
to Rick so that Rick and TC can take a look at it and see if they recognize this guy. And
Magnum needs to do some night skulking.
yeah. And so Higgins says he'll do it, but he wants Robin Masters' car back because Magnum's already been too reckless with it.
I mean, and it's kind of fair.
It's fair.
He was driving around and being shot at.
Yeah. So Magnum's like, okay, fine. Oh, also, there's this completely unnecessary cover story that
Cook's sister is Magnum's sister?
Is Magnum's sister.
She said that so Higgins would let her in.
I know, but then she keeps with it. So she's like, blah, 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 my father. And he's like, your father, as opposed to Magnum's father. And she's like, yeah, we're half siblings. And then she says, later on,
I need
she
my
says,
brother's stuff.
We need my brother's stuff. And Higgins is like,
Excuse me?
your brothers? And she's like, without pause, she's like, oh, half sister, different.
Yeah, she's like, from my mom's third husband, so no relation to Magnum.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, she's actually fairly capable of
and
this.
Higgins is like, weird family. All right. So the night skulking, though, involves Magnum putting back on his uniform
Oh.
that he promised he would never do, not even on Halloween.
I feel like that's disrespectful. Like, I think maybe that's why he wouldn't do that on
Well,
Halloween.
no, because he just didn't want to put the uniform back on. And she said, why'd you leave? And I actually kind of like this line, because he just resigned. He was like, don't want to be in the military anymore. Because he said one day he woke up at age 33 and realized he'd never been 23.
But anyhow, so I think that's good. He just wants
But
to
he's
fuck bitches and have fun.
He'd been in the Navy for 10 years.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what? I want to do stuff.
I want to be not Navy.
Refreshingly, he once again does not take advantage of Cook's sister's sorrow. I don't remember the character's name, but he does not take advantage of her sorrow for boning purposes,
No.
which he could, again, in the scene.
He actually says, I'm not going to because you're vulnerable. And I'm like, that's incredibly refreshing for a show this old.
Mm-hmm. But then we cut to outside, and there's someone in the bushes outside Robin Masters' house. It's the big Hawaiian guy who didn't die in the car crash, who killed Cook at the beginning of the first episode. And he's watching the house, and he sees the red Ferrari leaving, but Higgins is inside.
So, oh no, it's Higgins.
Yeah.
And then we'll leave that plot thread for a while.
Yeah, so Magnum's in his uniform. They get onto the base, and he's like, okay, as long as I don't know the watch, like as long as I don't know the guy on watch or the duty officer, I'll be able to just pretend because I still have my uniform, and apparently that's totally okay. I'll be able to pretend my way into this.
I feel like they don't. Well, I mean, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He only left like a year ago, so some people might not know he's even left.
That's true.
Right? Like, unless they served with him, they might have just thought he was away for a while.
Yeah.
Right?
So he's like, as long as he doesn't know them personally, it'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly. And like, that's not like the kind of uniform just anyone can get.
Yeah. So he walks in. He walks up to the ensign on watch, and I'm startled to see that the ensign on watch is played by Judge Reinhold.
In one of his first roles ever.
This is his third credit on IMDb.
Oh, good for you, Judge Reinhold.
This was 2 years before Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Wow.
And I was
well,
like,
Fast Times at Ridgemont High is that old?
1982. Wow. And I was like, is that Judge Reinhold? Looking very young. And he's
reading a Robin Masters novel.
Is he really?
Yes.
I didn't pick up on that.
Well, he tells him to get his if he doesn't want to go back to where he's from, which is like Minnesota, then he should stop reading Robin Masters novels on watch. In the Magnum world, Robin Masters is like a cross between like Stephen King and Tom Clancy, basically.
Oh, that's really cute. I didn't actually catch that little detail.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was like, I just started humming Axel F in my head when I saw Judge Reinhold. But again, he was in Beverly Hills Cop, in case that wasn't clear from the Axel F reference. Anyway, so he just so Magnum just sort of social engineers his way into the building, and he's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, who's the duty officer?" And Wolf, which is Judge Reinhold's character, says, "Oh, it's Ensign Healy." And Magnum's like, "Crap," because Healy, of course, knows who Magnum is and knows that he's basically made it pretty clear he's going to try and steal stuff. Mm-hmm. So he goes upstairs, he gets the information he needs, and he finds out
Cook had indeed been sent to Japan. Womp womp.
Well, no, but not by Cooley.
Yeah, by someone else.
What had happened was some scuba diving kids who had been diving where they shouldn't found a crashed plane off that island where Magnum and TC found the boat. And it actually was smuggling gold.
During World War II.
Cooley reported that it was actually a downed Zero plane from the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm. And so there was nothing there.
So there was nothing there, not worth salvaging.
Mm-hmm.
Cook got a letter from a mother in Japan, a mother of a lost pilot, who wanted him to confirm if it was her son's plane. The reason Cook went to Japan was to check their military records to corroborate the Captain Cooley's story about this plane, which was not true, right? And the only tip was that he's like, wait, this letter that I got with this name, this doesn't match up with this plane that Cooley reported. This is not this person's kid. This doesn't make sense. So he went to Japan himself. And so Magnum's like, it was Cooley. Haha, he's involved.
And it makes sense, because why would Cook smuggle cocaine? Because we saw at the beginning of the episode, if he wanted to smuggle cocaine, he literally has the "you don't need to look at my bags or search my stuff" security clearance, because I'm like Navy investigative services.
Yeah, he certainly wouldn't need to hide it within his person.
Yeah, exactly. So anyhow.
So while Magnum is finding this revelation that Cooley is indeed a dirty captain.
A jerk.
Cook's sister and Ensign Healy
come in because Magnum, she went, I don't know why he took her with him for fun. And he's like, okay, if anybody sees you and they ask you questions, say that you're waiting to meet Ensign Healy. And then
Ensign Healy
then shows up.
It's like, hey, what are you doing here? And she's like, oh, I'm waiting to meet Ensign Healy. I'm Cook's sister. I'm here to take his stuff. And
he doesn't question why she's here in the middle, like
at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, he does. He's like, at 2 a.m. And she's like, I, can't sleep properly because of grief or whatever. But you're the duty officer, so you can sign my stuff out, right? Because you right now have all the signing authority of the captain because you're the duty officer. And he's like, yeah, I guess I do. All right, come in. We'll get you his personal effects.
She's actually quite smooth and charismatic herself.
So they come up the elevator, and Magnum's like, uh-oh, I have to hide. So he ducks into...
He picks the lock.
And
ducks into Cooley's office.
His lock-picking skills were established at the beginning of the first episode when he picks the lock to Robin Masters' Ferrari.
Mm-hmm.
Ducks into Captain Cooley's office, where he finds...
Bum.
Captain Cooley's there, dead.
Womp. He's been double-crossed by this gold smuggler.
He's been dead for several days.
Well, they say since Friday, so it's probably like the weekend.
Well, this is like Sunday, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're not going to find him till tomorrow.
So the guy on the boat was not Captain Cooley.
No.
Yes.
But you know, Captain Cooley was involved in this gold plot and then has been double crossed by the dirty guy. But that makes sense as to why Captain Cooley was more than willing to let Cook go down, because basically Cook was this close, to uncovering this gold plot. And as far as he's concerned, this is a great way to get rid of somebody he hates and dishonor him at the same time. Perfect. What could possibly go wrong?
Leaving the guy dead in his office in the military base? There's that. That could go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I feel...
There's got to be a more subtle way to do that.
I feel like Magnum's prints are now everywhere in that office, but that's never resolved.
In the other office, actually. Magnum didn't touch anything.
He touched the door.
That's true. He picked the lock, too. And then they leave. And I wrote this down in a plan that would never work today with security cameras and stuff. They just leave. He says goodbye to Wolf. They take off. It's like... The fact that no one is like... Was anyone here? And they don't talk to Wolf. And he's like, well, there was Captain, I didn't actually catch his name. And they're like, what? Who? And like, well, he was about this tall, had a big ass mustache. And they're like, Magnum?
Wait, no, this is the 1980s. Big ass mustache. They're like, that could be anyone.
That's true.
But yeah, they're just like, later. Vroom. And then they go to Rick's cabana.
Yeah. Then you cut to Rick's. TC and Rick don't recognize the guy in the photo because it's a terrible photo. Higgins continually maintaining, I know, I didn't take the photo. I thought Magnum's photo was garbage as well. It's out of focus and crappy. I don't know how that guy has a job taking pictures.
Magnum's like, I was in a helicopter.
Yeah. And there's a nice little character bit of Higgins is like, all right, I've delivered the picture. I'm leaving. And Rick is like, here you go. Have some cash for your time. And Higgins is like, I don't accept tips. And TC says, I bet you don't give them either. I
think maybe that's a reference to British people don't typically tip.
Yeah.
Because they don't tip in the UK.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would be less known in the 1980s that you're supposed to tip in the US, because obviously you don't have the same access to information that you do nowadays. Mm-hmm. You can't just look up on the internet and see, should I tip when I go to this country?
Also, TC's black and might suffer discrimination in that regard as well.
That's true. They set up TC as quite the horn dog, which I don't particularly like, but otherwise he's a good character.
Actually, can I talk briefly about a great character moment from earlier in the episode that I love?
Yes.
When they're in the helicopter trying to figure out if the ship that looks like a naval ship is actually Laboul's ship or not. Mm-hmm. And Magnum's like, well, just sneak up on them. And he's like, how am I going to sneak in a helicopter? And he's like, I don't know, just sneak. And TC's like, okay, Magnum, we're sneaking. Okay.
Yeah, we're officially sneaking now.
Okay, yeah, right, that was it. We're officially sneaking now.
And they're still driving a humongous fucking helicopter that's incredibly loud.
But he does it in just this like really playful buddy way that like immediately sells that they are longtime friends. Yeah. Right? Like, okay, Magnum, we're officially sneaking now. Sure. I just really liked that. So Higgins leaves. They're looking out the one-way glass of Rick's office, and they're like, "Man, what's happening with all this stuff? Everything's crazy." And then Rick is like, "That big Hawaiian dude just got up and followed Higgins out of here, and he's a hitman. I know that guy."
Because of course Rick knows all these underworld people.
Then Rick grabs a fucking Uzi.
I know. Like, what is going on?
And tears off out of the club. So with TC in tow, Rick tears off down the street.
A large, busy public street holding an Uzi in plain sight.
And a white tuxedo coat.
It is literally the least subtle you could be. Like, you could have just put up a sign that said, "I am a gangster," and it would have been, like, more undercover than this.
So Higgins gets to the car. The big dude, the hitman, catches up with him. Still with bandages all over his face from the car crash. But what Higgins does is he cracks open the door of the car so that the Robin Masters alarm thing from the beginning of the first episode
will go off
in a minute. Rick and TC are still running to catch up, Magnum sees Rick running down the street with his Uzi and pulls over and is like, Rick, what are you doing?
Even Magnum is like,
And
what?
Rick's like, why are you in uniform? They're both like, what is happening here? Then the alarm goes off. The hitman is briefly distracted. Higgins is able to sort of like
Give him a karate chop.
give him a karate chop, which does not do anything.
I mean, he's not useless.
The guy laughs it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like that it shows that Higgins is like capable on his own too, right?
Yeah. And then they shoot the hitman. Higgins is okay. Everyone's
Yeah, well,
okay.
Magnum rescues Higgins at the last second, so he doesn't get shot by the hitman, who has his own gun, and then
Rick shoots the hitman with the Uzi.
And amazingly, the Ferrari is unharmed.
Yeah, and
This Ferrari's impervious to bullets and dog claws, apparently.
I believe TC does question Rick's gun. He is like, what's this? Like, he does actually point at the gun and is like, where'd you get that?
And then there are no consequences to this murder.
No, none at all.
This is our third consequence-free murder.
The Captain Cooley stuff never brought up again.
Yeah, he's
you
just
never
dead.
find out what happens to like any sort of, and it'd probably be boring paperwork. And that's not what's important. What's important is avenging Cook.
Yes.
So Magnum is like, Nabul has to be at the airport.
I know who Laboul is.
Or yeah, I know who Laboul is. Like, he figures it out. He's like, I know who it is. He has to be at the airport because they saw a speedboat picking up someone off the yacht and going in. So it's like he's obviously trying to escape the island. So I know who it is. So Magnum does the thing that any reasonable adult would do, which is he gets a handgun, and walks into the front door of the airport.
Yeah, I feel like this is never like what it not only tips me off into this as a different day and age is not like the analog sign with like the blinky lights and the letters that flip down, is that you are carrying a gun in an airport and you are not immediately shot and arrested and then rearrested and then reshot.
Yeah, I should say he realizes this while he's swimming in the pool out back of Robin Masters' place, and he rubs his shoulder, and there's a bullet scar there, which him rubbing the bullet scar set off an earlier flashback.
Mm-hmm.
So like back to Vietnam. So he's rubbing the scar, and then he's like, "Oh my God, I know who it is."
Nowadays we call that PTSD, kids.
Yeah. So he gets to the airport, and indeed it is who I thought as soon as I saw the guy on the deck of the yacht. It is his commander from Vietnam who was shot and held the Viet Cong back while Cook and Magnum ran for the helicopter, who you never saw fully dead, but you assumed he was dead, and it was like an hour ago, so you don't really remember him anymore, and you were pretty sure it was Cooley anyway, and now you're sort of blindsided by the fact that Cooley's dead, and Laboul has to be someone else, and you're like, who could it possibly be? And it's their old commander from Vietnam.
Oh, and it's still somebody in the Navy. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Foreshadowing.
So Inga and Helga see Magnum, and they go, Magnum! And the commander goes, Magnum, and turns around and goes, uh-oh, calmly walk to bathroom, must escape Magnum.
Yeah. I feel the commander didn't know it was Cook he was putting out a hit on.
No. Oh, no, he didn't. He actually says that when Magnum then enters the airport bathroom.
And of course, both of them have guns at this point because it's an airport, and as we all know, airports famously hospitable to open carry.
Well, not initially, because first they sort of exchange some words. The guy's like, you.
Magnum walks in with a gun visible.
Yeah, he says, you left me for dead, and Magnum's like, we came back for you and you were gone, and then the captain or whoever's like, people change after the war or whatever, and doesn't really explain why he became a drug dealer, but whatever.
Or a smuggler.
Then he's surprised, pulls a gun out, shoots Magnum in the shoulder, but Magnum shoots him directly in the chest, and then they both fall down, bleeding. The commander unconvincingly slumps over dead.
Yeah, that was a really bad slump. I would have made him take that again.
And no one comes into the bathroom.
Nobody's like, oh my God, gunshots.
No one.
A different time and age.
There's no sound. There's no indication that anyone has heard that this has happened.
I mean, gunshots in an airport bathroom, that's commonplace in the early 1980s, right?
Yes. Magnum, having taken another bullet to the same shoulder as his Vietnam scar, closes his eyes. The camera fades to black. And then cut to him cracking a brew.
And that is the essence of Magnum.
chilling on a lawn chair in the estate there, talking about how Higgins is all cranky because Robin...
Three hot French stews
were coming into town, and he said that he would show them around, which Higgins is like, that's my job, and they're all...
Now they're fighting again, even though a begrudging respect had been built up.
Yeah, and... Cut to credits after a shot of Magnum nursing his arm in a sling and nursing a beer in his good hand, sitting on the lawn chair in the middle of the the lawn at Robin Masters' estate as Higgins 6 Zeus and Apollo on him.
That's the essence of the show.
Yeah.
Is that at the end of the day, everything is fine, and Magnum is still like this happy-go-lucky guy drinking a beer in the sun.
Yeah. And Higgins tolerates him, and his friends are fine.
And his friends are fun, and they have adventures.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
And that was the pilot. Don't eat the snow in Hawaii because you shouldn't swallow cocaine or it will kill you.
I mean, don't swallow cocaine's good advice no matter where you are.
But you can't say that in the name of an episode. So don't eat the snow in Hawaii. Part 1 and part 2.
Yeah, perhaps that title wasn't as good as it could have been, but
Yeah,
you know.
maybe not.
Well, that was episode 1 of the Magnum Rewatch podcast. If you are interested in watching Magnum for yourself, it's on American Netflix, or you can order the DVDs if you live in Canada.
Like we did. And you too can watch, as IMDb grossly undersells it, The Adventures of a Hawaii-based private investigator. The next episode is called China Doll.
Oh.
And who knows what's going to happen with that, but I'm looking forward to it.
We'll tell you the plot and any related historical fun facts.
Thank you so much for listening. We were able to do this podcast as part of the mystery box funding from people on our Patreon, which is patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes if you aren't already, and we really appreciate your feedback. So hit us up on Twitter. Kathleen is Kathleen_LRR. I am Graham_LRR. It's GRAHAM. And you can find out all the rest of the stuff we do at LoadingReadyRun.com. And we really appreciate you listening to our weird Magnum Rewatch podcast.
Yeah. And in future, the episodes won't be quite so long.
No, but the first one was we had to talk about why we were doing the podcast. And it was a 2-parter. It was the pilot. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm excited.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah.